Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Toddy, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. Back-to-back meeting today.
Well, isn't that every day?
Just about.
That's every Thursday for me for some reason.
Blame OCI.
Yeah, let's not blame OCI for everything.
I'm used to it already.
Okay, you said it. Hey, Brian.
Hello.
I think I'm gonna go write a few more emails before the rest of the folks join. Brandon, I don't know whether you actually noticed this article, but Microsoft did some analysis on how much time we spent in writing emails and sitting in meetings or spending in meetings. So it turns out it's 2 days out of the 5 days that we have in the work week. Very relevant to our topic of discussion.
The only Microsoft article I saw was very irrelevant to the discussion, which was that you're investing in a fusion power plant. Everybody was like, oh no, it's going to destroy the world.
Yeah.
I said, it's fusion, not fission. That's the good one.
Mm-hmm.
We even got Phil here today.
On the days I don't give keynotes, I come to this call. So
Good catching up last week.
yeah, it was. Looks like the votes finally came in to have a new runtime spec maintainer.
Nice.
Not that we speak of the runtime spec in this call, but
They don't get enough attention over here. I think they're so effective at working through issues and pull requests that we just never felt the need.
yeah.
I should probably also pull in the dev thread over there because we're going to talk about that over here a little bit. The plus dev versus minus dev syntax on the Simver. I think they've had a lot more discussion on their thread. So the easy ones, while we're waiting for anybody left to show up, I've got a few that are just sitting out there for like actionable items. I don't know how much discussion there's need on them. But the plus dev on the version number is the first one up there. We've got an issue over an image spec. There's one over on runtime spec. If we don't have it, we need one over in distribution spec as well, I think. Or do we? I think we at least keep track of something over here. I'll have to dig. But the plus dev is kind of the indicator that this is development work after whatever that commit was versus before. And so it's the proper order when you're looking at Simver. So we got a few PRs sitting out for that if folks want to look at those. The other quick actionable item in there that I threw in just shortly before this was someone was commenting on what the Scratch blob content should be. And I said, yeah, it's right over there in the description. And then I went looking, I was like, oh, we didn't actually document the content of the Scratch blob where we were defining what the Scratch descriptor looked like. And so one line change there. Hopefully that's a quick and easy one to put in. But those two are just little things for folks. If you're looking, doing a little bit of modding, I hope those are easy approves. If there's any discussion needed, feel free to raise it. But otherwise, I just wanted to raise some attention there. Any questions, concerns on those before we jump ahead? So I think the big one to look at here, risk when copying annotations from image to runtime. We've got some discussion going on in that one. So I figured that would be a decent one to talk about over here. I'll get my windows moved around so I can share some windows. And that way you're not just staring at my face, because that's no fun. And so, yeah, we've got this open right now. It's been open for a bit. It's kind of gone back and forth. Different interpretations. But the gist of it is that they want to specify that when converting from the image spec to the runtime spec, that you might not want to convert everything over, all the annotations over. And then the runtime specification, there's back and forth with some language on the implementer's note saying that, oh, by the way, a bunch of the runtimes out there today, they don't do this anyway, even though it is a should and parts of it are must and other components. It gave me hesitation seeing that, for anyone that hadn't had a chance to read this. The hesitation for me is just knowing that so much of what we've been doing is kind of a backward spec, defining what someone has already been doing, and then we just specify that in the specification. And here we're saying that what everybody is doing is wrong. We're defining the opposite behavior in the spec. And so it gives me a little bit of pause to see that. On the flip side, a lot of this language has been in the spec for a very long time. And so things that we said that you're supposed to be doing, we haven't been doing, and no one's really complained. Has anyone had time to read this one yet? Have opinions? The part that really confused me, Sasha, I see you jumping off. Go ahead.
No, should this be in the runtime spec?
I've questioned that myself. It's been over here in image spec since the early days, for a very long time. And it's the border between image and runtime. So apparently way back in the day, they felt it belonged over here. But it kind of goes to a comment that I threw in, was saying that it probably only makes sense for people that are in both to really be looking at, or people that are in both specs are the only ones that are really going to understand this. And I'm not one of them. I think a bunch of us here are not in both specs. So it's not the easiest to review for us, not knowing what happens over on the runtime side.
I just feel like it should be in the runtime spec. It's describing converting into a OCI runtime bundle, right? And should image spec be prescriptive of what that process looks like?
Yeah, it's defining the conversion from image to runtime. So it's that border case. I don't know a good answer there. Mike, what are your things?
I mean, this is a complicated subject, right? Should the clients of OCI be able to pass a label or an annotation, right? And what if one of those annotations reduce security? Interesting topic, but it's sort of up to the clients and the administrators to do that. I would suggest that container runtimes provide some kind of filtering mechanism so that certain annotations can be reduced, eliminated either completely with a star or whatever, right? I'm not sure this needs to be in the image spec, except for the, the opportunity for the image spec to recommend, what happens to some of these annotations so that they, should they only be read by the container runtime and then filtered before calling the runtime engine? That seems like a pretty arbitrary statement, right? We use these annotations usually temporarily until certain features have been implemented, either as a KEP in Kubernetes, for example, or in a container runtime for some new native desktop type application. Those are my thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, a line that got my attention was a little bit earlier in there where it said converters should not extract annotations, which I thought was a very interesting line, since the very next thing is saying, hey, if there's a conflict between the two, you should use config labels over the annotations. I was saying, you just told me not to use it, and now you're telling me the order to use it. So, yeah, and I share a concern. I'd have to go back and look and see who was saying it. Might be somebody in this call.
Yeah, I remember in context, I remember that we wanted to make sure that, certain kinds of annotations could be, held inviolate by the spec team, right? Like OCI wouldn't be used by anybody else, so that we could have special annotations that we use to extend the, how the runtime executes.
I share, I think it was probably Tianon. I'm not sure if that was the comment or it might have been made elsewhere, where the comment was made that using labels instead of annotations isn't the greatest, because labels get copied from the base image down to the resulting image. And so it's very easy for someone in a base image change, just update latest with something that has an extra label in there that makes a security change or some other behavior change of your downstream tool that gets pulled in without you even realizing it. Now you don't know why your images are behaving strangely.
A little bit confused, I think, personally, in conversion, which is a link to the runtime spec. And the file system bundle spec is pretty lightweight. And it feels like everything in this document should go into bundle.md in runtime spec. I'm actually also a little confused because it seems like this is my ignorance of the state of the world in image layout versus runtime bundles, etc. But it seems like runtime bundles are almost identical to an image layout.
Runtime bundle has different fields in its JSON, and it has a rootfs. It does not have any layers. There's no concept of layers or layering in the runtime spec. The reason I would think that conversion belongs in the image spec as a maintainer of both specs is that this conversion spec is primarily about how to interpret specific fields of the image spec in the context of the runtime spec. So really, this document is about the image spec, and specifically how to take that image config and convert it into something usable by a runtime.
Sure, that makes sense from the context of the image itself.
Tianon, was it you raising some of the concerns about labels, or am I misremembering the comment?
No, it's in there. It's just buried in the thread about calling out Docker / Moby specifically in the spec, which I get he's got a bone to pick, but it doesn't feel like the right place.
Yeah, I tried submitting a alternate interpretation to call out individual implementations because I don't think we want to get into that in the spec either. I did a fairly significant rewrite when I was doing it, but it looks more significant than it really is. I just moved a couple lines up and rewrote the implementer's note.
It'd be helpful if in the runtime spec there was something that could be linked to from here to say exactly what type of annotations shouldn't be passed along, like if there's specific security related ones, or like if it should be a like instead of filter out, filter in, like only filter in annotations that you know are good rather than these known bad ones. But yeah, it's kind of unclear. Like as an implementer there, I wouldn't really know exactly what I should do with that still.
Takahiro did open an issue on the runtime spec to add to that new features blob, document, object, whatever you want to call it, a list of quote unquote dangerous annotations, unsafe annotations. So that a given implementation can query their runtime. You can do run C features and get a list of which annotations are unsafe. But I don't know whether or not that's sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, that leads to a pretty tricky flow in terms of like setting it up, but unless it's static.
Yeah, and even with this, I'm not convinced that Docker / Moby is going to implement it anyways. So from the perspective of the image spec PR, I think it still needs to be clear that this is optional. I don't have a problem with an implementer's note that says there are implementations that don't do this, because that's true and they never have.
Yeah, so instead of calling out that, hey, some of these there are these implementations and they should not do this. I changed the phrasing to say many implementations don't, and for portability, try to depend on behavior assumptions that they do.
Yeah, skimming over it, I'm surprised Docker's not supporting stop signal. Might need to look at that.
I think Docker probably supports stop signal via the config blob, not an annotation.
Okay.
Because I think stop signal was one of those that got cold in the conversion to OCI from
Gotcha.
the config blob, because it was controversial, but apparently people do want it because, you know, it's a useful thing.
Yeah, we might need to look at that for the cry Docker Shen. We're trying to normalize the use of stop signal across the cry container runtimes.
Cool. So any action that we need to worry about on this one here, or still just a lot of open discussion and people need to chew on this for a while longer? Sounds like time to move on to the next item here.
Yeah,
Um,
just, I think it's obvious that we have a big interest in the processing of these annotations and labels across, from the image spec on through to execution.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think as it's written right now, I think a bunch of us are not comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But just trying to sort out how it should be written.
Yeah, the blanket statements probably aren't going to work. We're going to have to work on each one independently, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the other one that I thought would be worthy of a little bit of discussion is a request to add a source subpath annotation or define that annotation. This came up after an issue had been raised for a while, went back and forth. It got a little cold. And so instead of continuing the issue, a PR was raised on it. It's been a lot of back and forth on this one in the issue. I think it's a little bit easier to follow some of the discussion here, but the request is that we already defined the image source, and it says, hey, there's a Git repo here where all this is stored in. They want to know the subpath within that for their tooling so that they can uniquely identify what was being built. And what was the build tooling they were working with? Was it build packs? Probably build packs. Anyway, I think it was build packs in there. And so the suggestion was, yeah, it was. The suggestion that I threw in at the very end here was to say, I think we're looking at 3 possible different things going on. Because what they want is a unique way to say, this is the image we created out of here. And we don't have a way to say uniquely that when you do a build from a certain path, that you know that there is a unique image that comes out of it. If you do a build from something like a Docker build, you've got build args, you've got the build targets, you've got all kinds of, which Docker file on the path, all kinds of ways you can change the build to be something completely different, but have the path be exactly the same. Whereas other tools, it is unique. And so they're looking for some kind of unique key. If they're looking for that, then we could maybe define what a unique key is. If we really want to know what the subpath is, then we should probably redefine it to say that it isn't unique. Or maybe we just push back and say, if this is for build packs, make a build pack annotation for their environment and just rely on that. So that was the 3 options I threw out there, and I hadn't heard anything back from them since that. But I wanted to raise this one up because it has been going back and forth a little bit, and just kind of want to get a little bit, get some input from the rest of the group here, see what people think. And I know I see Sajay Plus wanting the first option here to have a build pack annotation. That didn't come specifically from me. I think that was probably Tianan again. You've been given all the good feedback. That's why I make you a maintainer on these things, Tianan.
I think it was someone else's idea. It might have, I want to say it was Jason who suggested
Was
that
it?
for the
It
issue.
might have been. Okay. All right, I gotta make a new maintainer now.
Jason might even turn you down. I don't know.
I need to go back and look at all of our maintainers and make sure that count the companies, make sure no one company gets overrepresented. But that's been on my list of people to harass and say, let's get the good people that are giving good requests and changes and feedback, give them some maintainer power. I thought this might get more response from the group than it is. No strong opinions by anybody? Oh, let's go in twice. Okay, sold. On that note, who was it? My screen keeps moving around. Is this John? Yeah, John had posted that one. Is he here today? I do not see him on the list, but the Artifacts Working Group is trying to spin up a new meeting tomorrow. So John added that note over here for us to be aware. I think a handful of us are in that. I just discovered they had a Slack channel today or yesterday or something, so I jumped on that one. I will attend that, even though it's just talking about governance stuff. But I think this is a good one to be aware of. I don't know what the scope that they want to work with is just yet. Sajay, have you heard any changes, or maybe Toddy, on what their scope is that they're thinking of in the Artifacts Working Group? Are they limiting it just to search, or are they looking to go for the bigger picture?
We have a chance. Yeah, sorry, Toddy, go ahead.
I actually have not heard, but my last understanding is they're looking at the bigger picture for all cloud native artifacts. That's my last understanding. Sorry, Sajay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't have any more context on that.
I guess that's all the more reason to attend their meeting tomorrow and figure out what's going on. Cool. Other than that, Toddy, you raised the question. Do you want to ask it directly?
Yeah, I'm just curious are we targeting any date? What that date is? I think there is at least like a lot of interest to know when the 1.1 will be released. And right now it's like the last date everybody knew was end of January, beginning of February. And since then I don't think, at least I'm not aware of what are we targeting, and should we look forward to a specific date when that will be released, or should we go our ways and hope for the best?
I always thought end of January was a very aggressive date. But it motivates some people to get a little bit more active. From my view, the release candidate is really helpful. So I'm glad that's out, and I see a lot of people trying to do some implementations. I've seen Boras do stuff on their side. I've seen Zot do stuff on their side. So I'm hoping that having that release candidate out there is getting some more visibility. And the big thing that I want to do before we release is make sure that all the conformance tests are updated. So that's my big outstanding to do before saying we're ready to throw a stamp on it.
Is it possible to put some target dates? Just because this like unclarity is a little bit confusing, at least for us, right? If we can say like Christmas is a good time to release 1.1, let's put Christmas, and
if we say Christmas, no one's going to do anything until Thanksgiving.
Okay, I'll keep my comment.
Say it earlier. Mike, I see you jumping in there. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is a tough question, right? We need feedback, and we need the clients and the registries to go ahead and build against it and give us more feedback. Without the feedback,
the problem that actually we have right now, or at least, and this is kind of my experience, so take it as just my opinion, but I think we are afraid to do anything because we don't know what change will happen, right? So we are in this catch-22 where people were ready back in January, and then something happened and everybody reverted whatever they have done. And now I think if we want to have actually people implementing something, then we need to release the spec. Else everybody else will be waiting until that happens, right?
Yeah. It's harder to release it's harder to revert a spec after it's gone out permanently. It's in candidate 2 mode right now. Apologies again for, the change in plan. It is painful, and we understood that.
Yeah, but like
It's a risk you take when you're trying to generate a new standard, as opposed to following, the standard that users have picked. We're trying to push it, and that we pushed a little too hard, I think. Either way, it's what happened.
Okay, yeah. But so coming back, Brandon, to your question, so RC, we had RC1, RC2, RC3, right? Now, like, we can have RCs forever, and I can tell you that from experience, right? And that does not give us confidence on when the release will happen. So
yeah, traditionally, we've wanted to do, the GAs faster, but we've also supported release candidates for years on some of the specifications we've had. So it's hard to pick. The way you move forward is you propose, that the release candidate is finished, and see if you can get everybody to vote for it. Sometimes it takes more years. It takes a lot of time to make this happen. But the good news is that the OCI specification, even though it was in release candidates, generally can become a de facto standard even before it is, finalized.
Aaron, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think. There's some discussion about the 11th hour debate. I think I remain disappointed as a potential implementer and user of the spec, because in the current form, we've defined refers, we've defined the capacity to attach objects to images. We've even added artifact type, but there's actually nothing in the spec that requires that an OCI 1.1 registry allow me to put an artifact or attach a SBOM. And that's, I think, a pretty glaring omission, is that it's a specification that doesn't have any teeth, because there are implementations that could fully implement OCI 1.1, but you can only attach images to images, which is just like an absurd, like, we're going to end up in a situation where people are going to end up sneaking SBOMs in as images with layers that are defined as blobs, because that's what we've specified. And I think we need to address that. I don't think we can release at 1.1 unless the specification actually requires that you be able to attach something that's not an image, or upload a manifest that's not an image. The current stuff doesn't do that. We could have malicious compliance, and that fractures the ecosystem.
So I thought you were going one direction. I think you went a different direction in there. So there was an OCI registry can implement this without the new artifact manifest that we've been working on for all that time. And so use the image manifest, but I think you're going the other direction of saying that registries can reject the content and only support an OCI image and not all the other artifacts. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, which I think undermines all the work that we put into OCI 1.1 is what does refers mean if I can't attach an SBOM, if I can't attach an annotation? I think OCI 1.1 has to, you left a comment, I think it's an appropriate comment on 1030, which was we should figure out what registries want. But I think if you look at, say, the research that was done on 1025, right? Like the research on what registries currently support today. One of the holdbacks was the Google's container registry, right? But they are deprecating it. I actually just got an email last week that Google Container Registry is being deprecated in favor of Artifact Registry, right? This is the direction that these tools are going in. So I think
that one was a different reason. I'm happy to chat with you offline on that one. I think there's some Googlers who'll be happy to chat with you offline on that one. The registry I know there's going to be the big concern is GitLab, because they explicitly block.
What can we do to be proactive here in unblocking this so that OCI 1.1 is a meaningful baseline for client implementations, because right now, as I said, it isn't something that a WASM producer or an SBOM producer or any artifact producer can actually say, oh, it's OCI 1.1, our tool is supported, right? It's a specification that doesn't actually have any teeth to mean something for client implementations.
Yeah. I mean, I've run into a scenario just the other day where I realized you can't push by digest, which is breaking my head right now. But some of that might come into what can we throw into the conformance. And if you find a way to put in a conformance, even if it's not a hard must in the spec, you kind of throw a stick there the other way. I don't know we want to go that direction, because people would say, hey, the conformance should only enforce the must, not the shoulds. But I think for me, it's a little bit of shell shock after pushing out the working group that we worked with, and we came out and said, here's what we're looking for, to hear registry implementers come back after the fact that weren't part of that discussion and say they had concerns with some of the stuff we were doing. They were making decisions on their part that were completely opposite what we were pushing for in the whole working group. And so before we make a decision like this, I'd love to get more feedback from those registry operators, just because they've been very absent from a lot of these discussions. You're on mute.
Yeah, I guess I would say, I think we probably shouldn't push 1.1 GA until we've had that conversation, right? And we should figure out what this impasse is. And I think that's probably on the maintainers, the people who are, officially part of the OCI image spec maintainers, to do that reaching out and understand, is GitLab taking the stance that they're just now going to support OCI 1.1, in which case is that acceptable, right?
Yeah, if it's a single registry, I'm not too concerned, but I do want to hear from other registry operators. Toddy, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just maybe I'm a little bit confused about the list of registry operators, because we have AWS, we have ACR, we have RAM is here also. John attends, so we don't have representation with Harbor and JFrog, and I talk with both these actually vendors at KubeCon. They would be interested to participate more, but at the end of the day, I think the concerning part for me is like, if one of the registries doesn't want to do it, then how do we move the industry going forward? And everybody else is on board, and I don't want to actually do that. So can I stop this? And what is the process that actually we resolve these things? At the end of the day, it's kind of democracy, I hope, and not autocracy, where we can go and say, look, 5 other registries already are doing this. Either you do it or you are out of the picture.
Yeah, and I'm only representing my own vote here. I haven't heard the other maintainers say one way or another on your issue there, Aaron. A lot of it.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with your comment. Like, it makes sense that we should build a standard that's aligned with what registry implementations want to do. If we go too far, especially like we push them in a direction where they are not interested in going, the result is going to be deleterious to everyone in the ecosystem. So
if nobody follows the spec, then what's the spec value for?
Right, precisely. So I don't think it's misplaced. I think what I would want to see is what does a path forward look like to resolve the question?
Yeah, and one of the big reasons I want to start speaking with some of the registry operators and getting their feedback is that I also look at this from the security side, and from the security side, having an allow list is a lot better than having a deny list. If you're worried about someone pushing malicious content, it's very easy to just change one single character on your malicious content and suddenly you're allowed again. And that makes it a very a very bad situation from the registry operator's viewpoint that they want to be able to block bad content. And so I want to be sure to hear from them before we say thou shalt only do deny list, and realizing what that cuts off from them in the future. Today they might be allowing everything because they haven't seen this problem, but they might want to keep that on reserve to say, in the future, we want to reserve the right that we can switch from a deny list to an allow list.
So coming back to my question, Brandon, Christmas time?
I want it before Christmas. I don't know how quickly we're going to answer this specific question that Aaron's raising. It's a good question. I think we probably want to answer it before. It is in one of the, I think we did flag it as part of the milestone, so we're going to answer it one way or another before. But I really want to see this before Christmas. I don't want to wait that long.
So actually, I think we may be misreading the comment from GitLab. I'm not 100% sure, but I see that they have a open pull request or issue to support artifact type, and they have some interest in supporting referrers. And so in these issues, which just checking to see if they're actually, yep, they're from someone on the GitLab team. So it may be a misinterpretation of like, maybe they're talking about top level media types, right? Like supporting artifact type, right? I think we should probably ask for some clarification here from their team. Is if they have open issues that they intend to support bombs and other artifacts, it's kind of difficult to comport with this comment here.
Yeah, because the comment, the way I've always read it, is that from what they're doing, if it's a media type they don't recognize, they're going to reject it. And they've done that with the config media type. I would be surprised if they didn't do the same thing with the artifact type. But then back to Toddy's comment there, to do the best I can to try to answer your question. I'd love to see us come out with something in the next couple months to get another release candidate out that has conformance test and hopefully a couple of these things answered, and then give that another month for people to look at it before calling that GA. That would be my ideal world.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
sure
it's just a communication issue. We've never expected or that we would have to force registries to support arbitrary media types, right? We always expected them to be able to charge for certain types and to be able to filter them. So
I've been debating on 1030 for quite some time, and I haven't said anything for quite some time also. I feel like we have clearly stepped into distribution spec in 1030. Whether a registry accepts a type or not should be in the distribution spec, not in the image spec. You can store anything on your file system. Nobody tells you what you can store on your file system or what you can represent. So expectation of what the registry returns as error should not be in the image spec is what I feel like. And any of these implementations of how the registry implements should also be moved to a distribution spec is what I think.
I agree, Sanjay. I think the original idea was that OCI image manifest media types would be limited and restricted by the image spec, not arbitrary media types.
So from the image spec standpoint, we've already defined the artifact type, and we've said that it only needs to conform to the IANA. What the registry rejects or allows is up to their implementation. I think I'm also in line with that, which is if they want to filter by some types or look at what the content is. It's up to them to implement it. For example, in a government organization, maybe they don't want specific algorithms. They don't want SHA-1 or something like that. So it's up to them to define that. So I just feel like there's nothing in the image spec that is explicitly calling out that artifact is not supported anymore, ignoring the history of the discussion that happened. So can we, if at all any of these discussions for the registry exist, can we focus on the distribution spec to kind of like call that out?
I definitely hear what you're saying. I feel like this is another one of those borderline cases where it's between the two specs, where it's how you push an image spec to a registry and the content of that image spec or the image manifest. But it definitely goes into the question of, when we're talking about filtering, the concern is registries, and that is much more on the distribution spec. Oh, we had another OCI impasse. Or do people just want 15 minutes back or want to keep chatting in the chat?
Ajay, is your recommendation then to make a PR like this to distribution spec?
That's how I'm reading it. I'm reading it as you want registries to probably allow more.
Yeah.
Image spec is, in my opinion, gives a good enough guidance. It's got the fields, it's got the way to add annotations. We have defined precedence of artifact type over config media type. Now, when you make that HTTP call, that failure is not a part of the image spec, is what I read it as. So pushing that forward. I think Toddy's question is stemming something from what we have discussed, which is even for ACR, we're kind of like hesitant on taking up RC3. It's taking time. And how do we build confidence within that team to say that, okay, RC3 is good enough and let's move forward? And I think it's a tough discussion, but it's worth understanding that other operators are probably in the same bucket as, should we do this and yank it out? It's kind of hard for online like services that never stop to be able to break or change behavior on customers underneath. But if this stays stable for quite some time, then this just might be the GA candidate, is what we're seeing as.
So I know at a certain point, AWS, and I'm assuming Azure as well, went through and implemented the early RCs. And so you're saying you're holding off on doing RC3 for now?
It's still in discussion. I'm trying to see how we can squeeze.
There is hesitation actually to do the change because we don't know what will be reverted after that. And we cannot constantly go and chase the spec and RC3, RC4, RC5, right? So we're looking for some stability. And as you remember, like Jesse from AWS was saying the same thing. So whatever they implemented, they'll never release it to customers until it is actually GA.
And I get that. I'm completely sympathetic to that, especially given that we have been backing some of these things off and making changes. But to me, the big value of the RC is that someone actually does implement it, even if they don't release it, but implement it to let people know that it's working internally. They're ready for us whenever we do decide to GA.
I'll go back to January. Like we had everybody implemented artifacts and everybody reverted it. So I am kind of a little bit confused with what is the goal and what are we targeting. We had implementations that were working and everybody ripped it out. Even Docker Hub had implementation that was working, right? You remember that?
I think to go back to January and thinking of what was happening then, it was because everybody had implemented it and was trying it out, and we had disagreements on those implementations of how people should be implementing it. That's what the RC worked through for us. It wasn't pleasant. I feel your pain.
I don't know whether it was disagreements or was some registry did not have it implemented, and that's why we said in order to support these registries, we need to go and actually do all these changes to every spec, because now we're touching every spec, I guess, for that. But so whatever happened, Brandon. I think my more question is because I was listening to you and I was joking with Christmas, but if you say that the next RC is in a couple of months, we are at Christmas, right? So if the next RC is in 3 months, that's September, and then 3 months after that is Christmas, right? I would rather have like, okay, let's put a target date for the next RC, like end of July, end of August, at least some date towards which we can look at and say, by this date, we can say that will happen. And is it 1 RC or is it 2 RCs? Is it 5 RCs that we'll have? Because if we kind of look from project management point of view, right? We had RC1 like in December, then a couple of months later, RC2, RC3. If we say we'll have 5 RCs, I can make some estimation of when eventually this will be stable and when we should be releasing it as to our customers, and when AWS will release it. Because we were chatting with Jesse this morning about other stuff, and that came up again in mind. That's why I added it to this, because he said, and we're not releasing anything until like this is GA.
Yeah.
If we can just agree as a group to say, look, let's target next RC by date X, and that will be the last RC before GA, I think that brings some predictability for the implementation teams.
Yeah. When I say a few months, we're in mid-May, so June, July timeframe, I would like to see us in July have all the conformance tests updated and have an RC being pushed out sometime then. And then the thing that gives me hesitation is hearing registry operators say, well, think about trying it out and seeing if it works after you've GA'd it. That gives me concern. Because that means we're going to GA something that people haven't tested.
I think we forced ourselves into that position.
I agree with Aaron. We forced ourselves into that position with 999. That's where we are. We had everything implemented in RC1, right? And we did it without any hesitation at that time. Now every engineer is like, I don't know. I don't want to write something that actually I need to rip out in 3 months, or I need to change in 3 months.
So is it your ask for the maintainers to release something GA that hasn't been implemented anywhere?
I think it's more like some plan, so that people can feel confident, more than like committing to, hey, we're going to do GA this, irrespective of any feedback. But target, like you said, maybe July, have a milestone and saying that this is when we're targeting the next RC. And if there's no feedback that requires an RC, then we'll GA it. More transparent communication might ease the tension with all the consumers, right? Like, and if people know that, okay, we're going to head down this, then basically when I get asked like, okay, what is the next thing that's going to happen? It's more like, I don't know, is kind of currently the answer. So we can change that.
And maybe also as a group to figure out, because like we are trying to build something perfect that fits everybody. And my experience is that never happened, right? what is kind of our plan as a group, and more towards the maintainer's question. I'm not a maintainer. I'm just talking in this meeting. But what is like the plan to resolve these situations in the future? Right? Is it like voting? Is it like I don't know, some other process about that? Because we will always have somebody who is not happy with something or has not implemented certain field in certain JSON and something like this. So that is the reality.
I think we talked about before how we can improve the working group process to make sure what comes out of it is agreed upon by the necessary stakeholders. Because I think that was the problem is some people felt it ended too soon and not everybody got their vote in. Whereas, yeah, I think ideally these registry operators are part of the working group process, and what comes out of that is more solid, and we wouldn't be stuck in that situation. Like, yeah, I agree, like the revert doesn't look good, but there's also nothing else that's kind of on the bubble of being reverted right now. So,
and to that point, I think the working group, we had I don't know if it was unanimous or nearly unanimous within the group of what we released, but we didn't have the right makeup within the group of people that had differing opinions. And so it's just a question of getting those people into the working group early. Is that a not enough answer for you, Toddy?
I'm looking at the time and we're getting at the end. So should we, at least for my clarity, should I think of maybe next RC end of July?
I'd like to see a time frame. It's
yeah.
The goal for me is that we want to get those conformance tests in, and so the sooner that can be worked on, I'm thinking of my own availability between then and now and how much time I can spend doing that kind of stuff. But if other people can jump in and want to start writing that can speed the process up.
Okay. That helps, Brandon. So giving some idea, and if you are the only one writing the conformance test, actually we need to consider that actually you have your own availability, and that may be impacting the time. But at least that gives some clarity why we are not making progress faster. Thanks.
I think most of the credit goes to Josh, but I don't want to speak for him when he's not here.
Okay.
All right. Well, on that note, unless anybody has anything else, I think we're at the end of the meeting. Unless we're saying, unless we're trying to put a fixed 60-day time period instead of a hour long between RC and GA. Vivas, were you talking specifically about RFCs, or were you also thinking 60 days having an RC open in OCI before GA? You're on mute.
You're on mute, Vince.
Well, then didn't get to hear me say "God damn it" either. So there you have that. It was just to explicitly put parameters on rather than leaving it completely as an open-ended RFC. But that salesperson, you got offer last. Yeah, offer is not good forever.
Yep. You can always have another release candidate if there's a major change in that candidate.
And so basically just to put a time box on, an express time box on what is already the current status quo of it's a request for comment now, but like, no, for real, you got 30 days. Comment, and otherwise we're going to tag it, and just to keep it moving.
Yeah. For me, it's comment versus open issue and pull requests that need to get merged. So if we've got those, we know there are comments and things that need to get fixed. We got to write the fixes. All right. On that up note, or time. Thanks everybody for coming out for another week. Till next time.
Thanks, Brandon, for sharing this meeting. See you, folks.
Thank you.